Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the
Shut up, Lawrence.
Shut up!
This is what I said.
Welcome to the fifth ordinary meeting of the Literary Society. We'll get started with announcements. First of all, thank you very much for the Afro-Caribbean Society for agreeing to QUB tonight. We're here for the notion this House believes Black Lives Matter has done more harm than good. Before we get to that, a few more routine announcements. So first of all, I think Ryan, Irish Times, yes, the Irish Times, the first one of that is taking place on Saturday. We have our first team heading that, which is entirely first years actually. Mr. Hugh Dolan for the opposition tonight, and Miss Ciara Campbell, if you want to raise your hands and wave. Very welcome. There's a spreadsheet on the forum page. Ryan wants to know all your dietary requirements for any future events throughout the year. So if you're vegan or vegetarian or Liberal Democrat, dietary requirements. Pardon? Other announcements apart from that, I've probably forgotten. Does any other council members have any business they want me to talk about? Before we move on to minutes.
We're live tweeting if it's
yes, live tweeting as well. Yes, we finally got our membership cards for the semester after an extended period of time. These beautiful membership cards that Mr. Rob Whitehurst is holding the rest of the minute. Anyone who has paid for membership and has one of those membership cards, I will sign them at the end of tonight. If you have one of them, it allows you to get, you can avail of our speaking workshops, you can go get a discount on our Christmas dinner, formal in the summer, other stuff that I can't remember right now. Yes, you can vote in the formal vote at the end of the dates each week. Apart from that, I think we'll move on to the minutes from the last meeting, which I can't quite remember right now.
Are you for real?
ISIS.
Refugees.
Refugees, that's it. Well done.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along this fine evening. The fourth ordinary meeting of the Literific took place on the 13th of October and was attended by 58 members. Private member of business was heard from Mr. Chris Spratt, who asked the House what they thought of Bob Dylan receiving the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature in the past week. Helen O'Reilly responded that it was A-OK by her, as his words and lyrics speak to people on an emotional level, much like in poetry. However, she predicts in a survey that the award was indeed merited, but that it set a dangerous precedent where any old Tom, Dick or Slim Shady could win the award. In line with this, some pundit proposed the motion, this House would give Eminem the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature. Ultimately, it was defeated. Indeed, while many in the room wanted to vote for Eminem that evening, they struggled to raise their hand as their arms were heavy. It's time we got back to reality. Come on, guys.
Was that a popular music reference?
Secretary Whitehurst then asked the House what they thought of the second presidential debate between Donald Trump and Senator Hillary Clinton.
We're going to make America great again.
That's what he said, yes. Upon hearing the name of this beloved senator, the inner servers of Jason Buntingbomb 5000 began to whir into life, as he claimed that he was #for her. Mr. Mo Musa then asked the House if yet more leaked audio of Donald Trump commenting that he'd date a 10-year-old girl in 8 years' time would damage his campaign. Mr. Robert Murtaugh responded for the room by saying, let's move on. President's questions were heard from Mr. Calvin Black, who asked President Murphy when we would return to the Senate room. Promptly. And finally, Mr. Jerry Mueller then asked the President what he had for breakfast that particular morning. Man of the people, Ben Murphy, responded by saying that he enjoyed a toasted bagel with melted Gloucester red cheese with a side of proletariat tears. It was at this point that, despite a smear campaign from Crooked Ron, Mr. Ryan Neal was wholeheartedly elected to the role of external convener. Without further ado, President Murphy then announced the motion for the evening. This House believes European states have a moral duty to accept refugees. Opening the case for the proposition, Mr. Robert Murtagh. He defined refugees as people fleeing conflict or dispute due to race, religion, or particularly held opinion. He also wished to preface the debate by saying that under international law, refugees can't be sent back to their homeland while dispute is still ongoing. He asserted that laws don't go and make themselves, they require some form of moral foundation upon which to be built. He also wished to stress that the refugee crisis was more than just a Syrian issue, asking the House to consider the plight of Kosovo and Ukraine, among others. 386,000 people have been killed since the crisis began, including 14,000 children. Meanwhile, in the EU, compassion fatigue has set in. We've become so familiar with this sense of torment and horror that we've become numb and nigh on immune to its effects. He concluded by stressing the importance of integrating on top of accepting, so as not to create the same cultural and religious barriers which have led to the uprising of the far right in Europe. Opening the opposition was Mr. A.J. Merker, who posed his side's crucial question: to what extent is accepting refugees helping them? He called upon his own experience as a refugee, stating that if the alternative was to live in a divided community with no support, no income, and no family, that he would rather be dead. He accused the United States of not wanting to help in the crisis, along with the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. He rallied against the pro-refugee contingent of celebrities who have come forward for the sake of good PR, claiming that they weren't helping anyone. Mr. Morocco then picked up his copy of Atlas Shrugged and claimed that in this world, we naturally all treat each other like dirt, and these celebrity moralizers are living a lie so they can use their guilt stick to beat people and feel superior. Continuing with the proposition was Mr. Jason Bunting, who began by stating that opposition will be looked back upon in a generation as being on the wrong side of history. He believed that the moral obligation was clear to all involved, claiming that if someone's house was on fire and they came to your door, you wouldn't turn them away. He called foul an argument that we don't have enough space within Europe to accept any more refugees, and then sealed his argument by saying that we were the inhumane aggressors who were bombing these countries in the first place, so we should be able to offer to take them in. Continuing with the opposition was Mr. Ryan Neal. He began to contextualise the refugee crisis, saying that after the fall of Saddam Hussein, there existed a power vacuum in the Middle East, which has now been filled by so-called Islamic State. Toppling Hussein was supposedly our moral duty. Within Libya, we felt the moral duty to arm anti-Western troops in order to usurp Muammar Gaddafi. And today we have the moral duty to send weapons into an extremely unstable situation in Syria. By now, we must understand the consequences of our actions. He concluded by saying that we should allow the example set by Angela Merkel in wholeheartedly welcoming refugees initially before backtracking and realising it was a promise that we cannot keep. Concluding the proposition was Mr. Jack Armstrong. He summarised by saying that we should seek to avoid a repeat of the situation leading up to the Second World War, where European states were not quick enough to help before the Nazi occupation began in earnest. He reminded the House that Turkey has taken in 2.8 million refugees, compared with Ireland's 200,000, and that we have a history of ignoring crises in the Middle East until they escalate beyond our control. Concluding the opposition, and so the debate, was Mr. Mohammed Musa. He wished to stress that there was a difference between sentiment and pragmatism, and that real morality would consist of European states not funding dictatorships in the first place. He claimed that we need to cut the defence contracts with Syria that we signed in 2011, which have been ongoing since then, and concluded by saying that the rise of the far right in Europe and the general atmosphere of racism and xenophobia has direct parallels with 1934, before asking the House if we wanted to see a repeat of huge inter-community tension breeding fascistic and terrorist ideals respectively. Questions were heard from Conor Ardle, Matthew Sullivan, Rob Whitehurst, Con O'Neill, Sophia Lacour and Jeremy Muller. A vote based on House opinion prior to the debate was taken, which read 45 ayes, 3 nays and 5 abstentions. And finally, a casting vote based on Speaker's performance was taken, which read 28 for the proposition, 14 for the opposition, with 8 abstentions. May I take the minutes as read?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Whitehurst. And now we move on to private members' business, which we have every week. This is when anyone in the room can really raise an item of business they'd like to talk about, potentially initiate news that they'd like to have a debate about. I'm sure there's plenty to talk about this week. So if anyone would like to throw an issue up to the floor, we'll get a bit of a mini debate going, and people can sort of backlink what ideas around. Mr. Rogers, fair enough.
more of a response from last week's. Bob Dylan being given the Nobel Peace Prize. I think it was yesterday or the day before last that I saw. It's just a nice sort of story that I wanted to bring up. It was Leonard Cohen's response to it. He said, giving Bob Dylan the Nobel Prize for Literature is like pinning a mountain onto Mount Everest for being the highest mountain. And I like that, it's nice. Leonard Cohen is a nice man. Oh. I think we should all honour Leonard Cohen with something.
Honorary like membership.
I am a fair. If we gave him that, then he might be able to speak.
That's true.
And if he came and spoke, you might sing.
I mean, like, the budget allowing, the general.
Except Buddhist.
Any other issues? There is quite a lot this week. Anyone at all? Is that somebody putting their hand up? Yes, sir.
Well, see, I'm trying to be not too loud because I don't want to disturb the mic. Because I'm awfully close. But does the House think that Donald Trump has jumped the shark in saying that he would only accept the election result if he wins?
Yes, does anyone think that? Does anyone think that he's jumped the shark by?
Define jump the shark.
Yeah.
You just don't know what jump the shark means.
Anyone want to
You guys are wasted on that.
The sports said it was exciting.
He probably jumped the shark whenever he said all those horribly racist things like a year ago.
That's fair. Yourself, Mr. Finley?
2 points. First of all, I wouldn't ever say Donald Trump had jumped the shark. I think that Donald Trump is the shark. And America has jumped him by even contemplating what's happening now. Second point is, I don't know if so far we actually have a mention of Donald Trump in our minutes. And if not, I would like that to continue to be the case. So I propose we don't debate this motion any further.
We discussed it this week when you weren't out.
All right then. Does anyone want to move on to another topic?
No, I want
yourself.
to kind of Finley.
No, I think that we keep talking about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, but we're like ignoring what America is actually doing at the moment. Like they just bombed Yemen like 4 or 5 days ago, and no one's even talking about that.
Anyone want to carry on that idea? Say anything else? Oppose that?
Jill Stein for Jill Stein. Jill Stein.
Would you vote for Jill Stein?
Yeah, that's the response America has taken.
Okay, at this point. Fair. Then you're voting for the Republicans then. Does anyone have any other topics? Yourself?
Recent opinion polls show that the Tories are in 47 and Labour are in 28. Sorry, 57. No? 57. I was amazing that the size was higher, it was 47. And but I think that Labour should just step down now.
It's only a few years.
I'd like my disdain noted on the record there.
I would put this beer cans inside you.
Okay, moving swiftly onwards to one last
I'd like to know if anybody has any opinions on the Chad Evans case, which has recently been.
Does anyone agree with this? Anyone want to, argue in favour of the status quo? No, I think that's pretty conclusive. Anyone want to take that idea? Yourself?
You want actually, but
Pardon?
I want to really the idea to be honest. What does everyone think of what WikiLeaks documents they're releasing in terms of Hillary Clinton and the treason that applies?
It's a very loaded question.
I'm not going to do a chat up. Whoever it is.
Would anyone like to respond to that loaded question, or shall we move on? Yes, let's move on. Okay. Yes, so we've won the President's questions, which is sort of a tradition of the society. Anyone in the room can ask me anything they want within limits of decency and reason. Anyone have any questions for me? Ms. Vedder?
What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had. Don't know what the name word for it is. Sausage in a blanket, I think the name, or hot dog lattice, I think it was called in the shop. I had that at 12 o'clock, so they were really nice. So, yeah. Am I getting a no for having like a balanced diet? Right, anyone else have any questions for me? Self and hands?
Where did you get your red charming bow tie?
I'm not going to say. Because you already know the answer. Frankly, I already feel embarrassed enough. So, it's a nice time, that's all you need to do.
Tell them the website.
No.
Do it!
No, because I'm advertising and that bridges our contract. Yes, moving swiftly onwards from that, I think we'll go to the debate then. The debate tonight, as we all know, is this House, please. Black Lives Matter has done more harm than good, and with that, I welcome to the floor the first speaker for the proposition, our first year rep, working for Mr. Matthew.
So it is my job as the first speaker of the proposition to define the motion, and we, the proposition, define it as this House believes that the American movement, Black Lives Matter, is doing more harm than good. So I feel as first speaker of the debate, I have a sort of a, forgotten the word, I should give you some context. So Black Lives Matter was set up in 2013 to combat racism and to be a voice for those whose family and friends were shot by police unlawfully. That was very admirable, but that was 2013. This is 2016. Black Lives Matter is now a movement that actually cares very little for Black Lives Matter, that uses tragedy for political gain, and incites violence and hatred without looking at facts. As I've said, in 2013, Black Lives Matter represented families and friends of deceased members of the black community who were shot by police unlawfully, and they pushed for justice for those who are unlawfully murdered. And today they still claim to do this. But however, if you look at the demands on their website, this tells a far different story. Now, I'm going to list out some of these demands, and I want everyone in the House to think to themselves, does this give justice to those who have been murdered? An end to capital punishment. An end to all jails, detention centres, prisons as we know them. A resurrecting of the tax code. An end to the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal. A cut in military spending. Universal healthcare.
On that point, sir, the first few ones you mentioned, Don Beverly will go some way to alleviating racial tensions due to the fact that the criminal justice system in the US is inherently slanted against the black community.
Well, on that point, it's because of their socio-economic background that the blacks are far more likely to come in contact with police. But besides that, I don't see a point. This is a movement to represent those who have been killed by police, and they're asking for universal healthcare and an end to capital punishment. That doesn't seem like it's doing them any justice whatsoever. And in fact, not once in their demands do they actually ask for justice for those who were killed, or do they ask for trials of police officers that killed unarmed people. Now, beyond their demands, we must look at their actions. And they ignore most deaths that don't fit their narrative. Flandre Castile and Alton Sterling are two people that are probably quite familiar to the House. They were killed in July of 2015, I believe. Might be this year, actually. But on those 2 days where both of those men were killed, 21 men were also killed in inner cities, all being black, but none of us ever heard about that. And if you look at some cities like Chicago, 36 people were killed just in the last 16 days. And in addition to that, 221 people were shot. Yet Black Lives Matter does not tell any of us this. But my colleague will look more into that. I will instead be looking at Black Lives Matter inciting of riots and the consequences of these, and the Black Lives Matter rhetoric. So first, I'm going to look at the Baltimore riots. This was started after Freddie Gray was put into a coma after being in the back of a police van, and he died on the 28th of April 2015. And in response to this, Black Lives Matter encouraged and instigated a riot. This cost Baltimore $9 million. 144 cars were set on fire. Yeah.
Why does it matter how much money it cost? Someone died. Is that not more important?
I'm getting on to that, but the fact of the matter is, what I'm saying is the fact that they are not doing anything. These riots aren't changing anything. And in fact, what I was going to go on to say is another 2 people died because of these riots. Like, I don't agree with the murder of Freddie Gray. I thought he was unlawfully killed. But a riot is not the answer to that. Costing Baltimore £9 million, setting 114 cars on fire, looting 250 businesses isn't going to change a thing. 113 police officers were also injured, and we don't even know the numbers of civilians who were injured, which I assume were far more.
On that point, so you're attributing all those actions to the movement Black Lives Matter, and you're stating that they instigated it, which is quite the accusation, no?
Yes, I am attributing it to them because people in that riot started shouting Black Lives Matter. They were encouraged by this entire thing that they're being discriminated against and all of this. But anyway, the aftermath of this was the deadliest month in Baltimore for not 1 year, not 2 years, but 44 years in terms of homicide, because police left Baltimore and there were 50% less arrests in May the month after. And it's because police felt unsupported. When they attempt to make an arrest, one police officer stated that 30 to 50 people surrounded at one time. And one member of the black community in Baltimore stated that they went from over-policing to no policing at all. This is the outcome of what Black Lives Matter does in places like Baltimore. And you may say, well, they're obviously against the system, but you have to look, well, who is in charge of the system? They have a black mayor in Baltimore. They have a black chief of police, a black state attorney, a black general attorney, a black lieutenant governor, and a black president.
On that point, sir, there is a black president, but 2 of the most voted presidents that have been lobbied against him. 39% of people think he is a secret Muslim. 10% of people think he wasn't born in the United States. And then if we look at the federal level more, there are no black senators. There was one, but he left in 2008 to do some other job. There are about 40 black representatives in the House. And at gubernatorial level, again, they are unrepresented, and at most levels of government, they are still unrepresented.
I mean, I don't see what the first 2 points about him apparently not being born in America have got to do with anything. But the fact of the matter is, in terms of how it applies to Baltimore, there's a black mayor in Baltimore, there's a black governor attorney, a black attorney general, a mostly black police force in Baltimore.
On that point, you're out of time.
But we've also seen such things as the Milwaukee riots, where a black police officer shot a black man, and then riots ensued. There was video of him being lawfully killed as he aimed a gun at the police officer. Yet Black Lives Matter did not care. They ensued the riots, they encouraged them, and several buildings were burned down, several police officers injured, several cars burned down, and one man, when rioting, gave his justification as rich people, they got all this money and they're not trying to give us any. That is simply not justification whatsoever. But on that point, the bell is ringing, so thank you for listening.
Thank you for that, and I'd like another round of applause for being the speaker for this. Just to remind everyone, I am an idiot and totally forgotten to explain the real very start of the meeting, so everyone has 7 minutes to speak. The first and last minutes of that speech are protected time, so you're not allowed to raise points of information within those first and last minutes. The middle 5-minute section, you can raise points of information. Try not to, the moment somebody has finished answering the previous point that they've taken from the floor, to immediately ask them another one, but you need to give them time to sort of, continue to flow their speech. Sorry, that's the word. Yes. So if everyone could just keep in mind the rules, I will ring the bell at first and last minutes, just to let everyone know that protected time has started finished. So with that, we'll move on to the next speaker, the first speaker of opposition, Mr. Finbar Robb.
Firstly, I'd like to point out that when Mr. Murphy used the word flow, is when the flow of his speech started to dissipate somewhat. Secondly, I don't see why the effect of having a black mayor and a black police and a mostly black police force in one city would do anything or do much at all to display the what is in the US a largely white political structure, where time and time again we see enacted in law a sort of underhand continuation of Jim Crow, which happened right after the emancipation of slaves and right after the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. As soon as those acts were passed, they started the states, which are the meth labs of democracy, started trying to find a way around it. As far as I can see it, the Black Lives Matter is the natural descendant of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and Martin Luther King in both their aims and the criticism that is weighed against them. Apart from segregation, which is now sorted in law at least, if not in practice, and voting rights for the minute, although that is creeping back with ID laws, which are making it harder for the same kind of people to vote. Their mission statement, which can be easily found on their website, highlights 4 goals. The first one, oh, by the way, sorry, the one effective, if these 4 goals came to be, would be to limit the communication between the black communities and the police force, as you put it. The first goal is to decrease the racial wealth gap, which is very prevalent because black households only hold 6% of the wealth of whites. 2, fix failing public schools. Education is one of the drivers of social mobility with most people out of poverty that we know already. As we've already seen, the number of black people who obtain a high school degree has increased remarkably in the last 50 years, and it's now reached level with whites. However, the number of black people in the US who finish a college degree is still much, much, much lower.
On that point?
The third point is to combat housing inequality, as 1 in 4 families qualify for welfare assistance, but don't take it, and so are left to fend for themselves. And so black and Hispanic communities still remain largely and on average poorer than white counterparts, even if they earn similar incomes. And then the fourth point, which is really the most pressing, is the dismantling of the prison industrial complex, the policy of mass incarceration in the United States. As the land of the free, as it is known, which holds 5% of the US population, holds 25% of the world's prisoners, which is a 400% rise in since 1971, when Richard Nixon decided to declare war on drugs and declare them public enemy number 1. In 1972, the prison population was 320,000. Now it is 2.3 million, and 40% of those are black. Black people represent 40% of the US prison population. However, they represent 13% of the overall population. Something is clearly happening there.
No point.
No, I can go with come on, go. Richard Nixon in 68, and then again in 72, when he was running for the presidency. Established himself as the law and order candidate, which was until the 90s became a staple of the Republican Party narrative. Law and order is effectively dog whistle politics for them on the streets, the loud ones. Because it came after the 60s and the civil rights movement, Black Panthers, the anti-Vietnam War protests, which appealed to the silent majority, as Nathan termed it, who were put off by these kind of things. They saw it un-American, and things were lovely in the Eisenhower era. Then the nasty Democrats came along and they ruined it all. And what the chief way this presents itself was the war on drugs, which, if we define a law, an unjust law, as the majority imposing a certain will upon the minority, which they are not willing to subject themselves to or be party to themselves. The war on drugs is exactly that. It is the continuation of Jim Crow. It goes right back to 1915 and the production and release of a film called Birth of a Nation, which was effectively a subplot to Kill a Mockingbird, where it showed a white woman throwing herself off a cliff to avoid being raped by a black man, who was obviously a white actor in blackface. It was a hugely successful film, and the response to it was effectively the birth of the KKK as we know it. It started the burning of crosses and things, which hadn't happened before, but go back to an earlier mythology. And just seeing this film reinvigorated that contingency and created the idea that whites need to defend themselves against the black menace. And there are policies such as which are within the war on drugs, such as mandatory minimums, where by coke, which is a nice defined powder, suburban drug, is cast as a misdemeanor if you're caught distributing or in possession of it. Whereas crack, same drug, different form, same effects, just different look about it. In fact, it's found in city, urban slums. It's classed as a felony. Now, if you're a felon in the United States, not only are you barred from voting while you are in prison, but you are, when you come out, in many states, you're barred from voting for life. Also, you'll not be able to receive welfare, student loans, or public housing. And there's these are non-violent offenders who are given a prison sentence, which of prisoners who apply for plea bargaining, those who are black have a far disproportionately higher rate of being sent to prison than those who are white. Also the fact of stop and search. Whereas there is this assumption of black guilt over white guilt. Whereas stop and search were in our cities, most notably in New York. Black people were stopped frisk disproportionately higher, whereas white people were most often found to have illegal contraband in their possession. And it's quite hard to blame anyone for being indignant about this. So the United States is unarguably slanted against black citizens. Constitutionally, it recognises that the lives matter, but in practice, everything has been done to make sure that the lives don't matter as much. I heard you the first time.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, and we now welcome the second speaker of the proposition, Mr. Conor Neal from Convened.
Members of the House, opposition, fellow comrades on the proposition, and distinguished guests around the room, thanks for joining us. Unlike your previous speaker, I'm actually going to try and give you some facts, maybe the evidence, rather than anecdotal, just sort of things like that. I challenge you to leave at the door your privileges and prejudices, your biases and your basis for what you want to believe with regard to this motion. To not necessarily ask yourself the most popular questions, but definitely the most important ones. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to examine the real reasons as to why there is such ethnic disparity in the US, but how the Black Lives Matter campaign is effectively barking up the wrong tree and also the wrong century. This motion, and indeed my part in it, will only serve to address the key issue, which is that the campaign has done more harm than good. The campaign has distracted the black community in America from the real issues that are negatively affecting their lives. I refuse to believe that any member of my proposing team has an inkling of racist fervour in their bodies. I refuse it. I believe the opposite, in fact, and that is why we are here, dispelling the trumped-up headlines and getting to the real issues. Earlier in the year, Black Lives Matter released a series of demands that they wanted to adhere to in order to stop the protests, both civil and uncivil. Among these were reparations for past and continuing harms against black people, for example, slavery, the monetary scale of which couldn't be any more significant, with some estimates going into the trillions of dollars having to be paid back if this was actually to take effect. these demands are feasibly impossible. The federal budget's at minus 20 trillion, I think it is now. So, okay. Slavery has been around for millennia. The Egyptians used it, the Greeks, Chinese, Turkish Ottoman Empire, the British, and indeed the great empires of Africa used it. I'll take it in a moment. Any of the biggest civilizations, you name them and they did it. Whilst disgusting and inhumane, the perception of slavery as being a white Western institution is nothing short of fantasy. Most Afro-Caribbean...
On that point, sir, there's also the fact that slavery still exists to this day. However, African slavery in the United States and also Britain, let's not exempt Europe from this, it lasted for 600 years and didn't end that long ago. And even when it ended, it didn't really end. Slaves were effectively charged with their own freedom, and compensation was given to slaveholders.
And then it just goes to put like slavery's existed forever. I'm not saying that it hasn't, I'm not saying it's right or that people shouldn't hold opinions against it, but it's always happened, and that is disgusting, but that's our human history. But anyway, so most of Afro-Caribbean people in the US came from West Africa, where they were sold into slavery at the highest bidding price by their own African people. So tell me, will the Black Lives Matter now be looking at the countries of West Africa and seeking and suing for compensation? I don't think they will. I don't believe they will. The vast majority of economists assert that there is absolutely no proof to suggest that in the same scenarios, white people earn more than black people do. In the majority of areas in the US military, black people proportionally make up more than any other ethnic group.
On that point, sir?
No, I think so. In any of the flashpoints on the East Coast, Ferguson, Baltimore, DC, black people again by far have proportionately more representation than any other ethnic group. In Baltimore, 3 out of the 6 officers in the Freddie Gray case were black. The police chief, black. Mayor, black. Attorney General, black. 9 of the 15 city councillors who run the city were also black, and the whole city council were Democrat. Now, Finn, I'll take your point, but it's called delegation of power. I understand what you're saying about the senators, but these people are instructed to run the city. This doesn't come from federal. So, like, this is what I'm saying. It is a majority black council, and so whenever people talk about institutional racism, these are the people who are running the cities in which this is going on.
On that point, sir. Okay. Firstly, the whole reparations thing is, yes, slavery, but most of it is because black people's lands were taken from them because they introduced a system of taxation. Most black people were trading with barter trade, and there's no way they could have paid the money. That literally was made to work against them. Secondly, the reason why the majority of the people who went to fight war were soldiers who are black is because college kids who are predominantly white were excluded from it. Muhammad Ali, who refused to fight.
I'm talking about 2016. But we continue. I'm just saying 2016.
Muhammad Ali, who refused to fight in the Vietnam War, had his title stripped from him because he refused to go fight in the white man's war, which he found unfair.
Disgusting. And that was 30, 40 years ago. That is disgusting. You didn't hear me denying it. But at the end of the day, look, you take here in Ireland. You don't think Irish people are driven off their land, starved to death during the famine? Irish people are also exported as slaves by the British Empire. That must be about 1600s.
Oh my God, sir.
How can you deny these facts? Okay,
On that point, sir.
no, yeah, I need one. I've been absolutely bad here. Okay. Yes, so, right, I want to discuss with you the disparity even among black communities in America. On average, an African American household will make $38,000 per annum. This pales in comparison to the Nigerian American household, which will make $61,000, and the Ghanaian American household, which will make $57,000. All black households. Tell me how the latter groups have slipped through this racist net cast out by the American institutions. These aforementioned communities are all black. So are you telling me that somehow
on that point, please. I African Nigerian American community, Ghanaian Nigerian community, because these are people who have grown up within a black system, who know who they are, who their own person is. An African American is brought up in a system where their history is completely stripped from them, where their personality is based on what is a white precept of what you should be, and you cannot achieve because what you are and where you were born into does not allow you to attain what the system wants you to attain. So you cannot compare Nigerians with an African American. It's just It doesn't work.
I genuinely do accept the point, and I agree with it. I agree that this is something that is in the mindset, and it's very off-putting to African Americans. But my point is that this debate is based around if there's institutional racism. So if, like, by law, black people are discriminated against, but this is what I'm saying, it's not true. I agree. I agree with the points you make, but there is no law. You show me a law in the Constitution that actively discriminates against black people. Right. Fine now?
Yeah. Sorry, I rang the bell a minute ago. You might not have heard it, so you've got about 30 seconds left.
Alright. To conclude, the aims of Black Lives Matter are solidified, and so infer systematic racism in the government. However, the evidence proves otherwise. Show me a law that infers a racist agenda, and I will admit. I will admit I'm wrong if that is the case. I can say this with great confidence, and so I know there is one. Does racism exist in the world? Of course. And where it is shown, it must be stomped out. There isn't a person on this side of the House who doesn't detest racists, who wasn't overjoyed when Officer Michael Slager was indicted and charged with murder when he gunned down Walter Scott in South Carolina, as the victim was running away from him. You show me an example of racism, I will agree with you, and I will empathise with you. But that is not what this campaign is doing, and instead it seeks to divide people along lines that do not exist, and therefore their motives and ideologies should be dispelled. Black lives do matter, but this campaign does not. Support the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Neill. I will now have the second speaker for the opposition, Mr. QUB.
Now, I'd like to begin by referring back to something that the second speaker for the proposition said. But they said to leave our privileges and to leave our prejudices at the door. And what I have to say to that is why? Why should we leave behind privileges and prejudices when this is exactly what the movement is about? It is about the privileges that are held by those in power in society and the prejudices held against those who have none. And that is the core of what the Black Lives Matter campaign is about. It is about the fact that institutionally they are disadvantaged and put in a position where they don't have power, where they don't have a voice. It was mentioned that we have a black president, but he can't do a thing. There's a Republican House of Representatives and a Republican Senate who want nothing passed in relation to race issues. They want it completely off the agenda, and he can't do anything about it. My colleagues spoke about the social issues in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'd like to move on to talk about how politically it has definitely done more harm, done more good than it has done harm. It's the important factor is that this has once again got race to be an issue in American politics, because it has for so long been sidelined. In the past 10 years, the amount of discrimination-related bills that have been passed in the United States, you could almost count on two hands. And of that portion, even fewer of them were in relation to discrimination against black and ethnic minorities. It's been completely ignored by the government. So when we're told to leave our privileges behind, to talk about how we shouldn't get angry about these sort of things, why? When it's an area of society that has been so long been marginalised, whenever they're trying to finally have a voice, why is it that then they are stood up and say, we should regulate how we behave? You can only protest this in the way that we like. Any time that they try to participate in that system, it works against them. So, and that is why it's important. Yes?
I understand what you're saying, but since when is burning down shops and costing the city of Baltimore $9 million like a fair form of protest? We have no issue with peaceful protesting. No one has ever had that. But to justify how you feel as to how much damage you're going to take out on the city, as to how many people that are going to get hurt, I actually can't accept that under civil law. I can't accept those motives as the more pissed off you are, the greater damage you're going to do. They can't cause in a civilized society.
Something that's often been forgotten about this evening is that the motion for tonight is the Black Lives Matter has done more harm than good. That's what I'm trying to oppose here. Not that the Black Lives Matter movement hasn't done things that I disagree with, but being able to bring back in issues of race, making it central to people's minds, is something more important than ever. The black president is on his way out. We have the prospect of an absolute maniac moving into the Oval Office. Hopefully we don't. And in that situation, these are voices that need to be heard. Earlier it was mentioned that there are some 48 black congressmen in the House of Representatives. One of them showed up once in Congress wearing a hoodie. He did this to make the statement that wearing a hoodie does not make you a hoodlum. This was the point to protest the perception by the government, by the conservative media, that black youths, black people in the modern world are somehow all inherently criminals. They've been demonized to think that they can't function like ordinary people, and that's part of why Black Lives Matter has done more good than it has harm. Because its manifestos, its websites, they talk in contemporary language. One that represents the interests of modern African Americans. It talks the way that they do. It doesn't try to hide between the way that the media, that the conservatives, that they want them to speak. They let their own voice finally be heard without it being restricted by what others are saying it should be. It's about freedom of expression, and it's something that has been so sorely missed out on in recent years, and one that is finally coming to the fore. And we go back to Baltimore, something which has been very frequently mentioned today, and about how it has a black attorney general, a black police commissioner, and about how apparently the US government is very representative now. I didn't know about this development. How recent was this? Very shocked. So, I have a name for you. Timothy Stansbury was 19 years old, killed in January of New York 2004. Officer Richard S. Neri, Jr., a white man, testified that he shot the unarmed Stansbury accidentally when he opened the door on the roof of a building that he was patrolling. He was not armed, he was not posing any threat, and the murder was a complete accident. The sentence was that Officer Richard S. Neri had no pay for 30 days, and he had his gun removed. That was it. That was the extent of this sentence for cold-blooded murder. You say this doesn't deserve riot, this doesn't deserve social uproar. It does. It's a serious issue, and it's one that needs to be tackled. And that's why this needs to be raised here today. Andy Lopez, 13 years old, carrying a pellet gun that supposedly resembled the shape of an AK-47. He turned around to an officer who promptly shot him. Asked him to lower the gun. Jerry Lopez said nothing, merely turned to him, was shot dead. No indictment, no punishment, nothing. There was no penalty for what this man did. And that is what is at the core of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's that we don't need to be flinching, we don't need to back down to the trunks of the Lord who are saying, oh, these are just the campus students, they're getting riled up in issues that don't even matter. These are issues that matter, and issues that always have, and issues that have been censored time and time again by the media and the press, and everyone who doesn't want it to be mentioned. And that's the core of what this is about. And it is a leaderful movement. You talk about how riots and such, that's an issue with the Black Lives Matter movement, but it doesn't prove that it's done more harm than it has good. They associate themselves with the movement, but it doesn't mean that we need to automatically assume that they represent what the movement is about. It doesn't have any central figure. There is no Martin Luther King, no Malcolm X at the head of this movement, and that's something we need to recognise. But there are bad things come from the movement, but we can't distract from what the core message is, and what is a very positive core message, which is what the movement stands for. The DNC endorsed the Black Lives Matter movement. They rejected this endorsement, but it still shows how far they've come. Everything they have done has tried to further the struggle that African Americans in the US have faced for so long that has never been mentioned. And that is why it is ludicrous to stand up here to try and say that it has possibly done more harm than it has done good, which is why we all must reject this motion today. Thank you.
And we now welcome to the floor Dr. Craig Miller to close the argument for the proposition.
Okay,
2013, I will 100% concede that Black Lives Matter started off as a good idea. It started off as a great idea. It started off as a noble cause, a necessary cause, and something that we have to, well not in the UK, but the Americans had to get on top of. Do I believe that right now in the current state of the movement, it is actually doing that? And my answer is no. And I'm going to say the reason why it's no is because it's currently doing more harm than it is doing good. It has done good. I'm not disputing that. I do not believe this side of the House have possibly explained it has actually done more good than it has done harm. I don't believe we've yet, however, proved it's done more harm than it's done good. I will now start to do that. There is some level of institutionalised racism within the police system in the States, and that is probably why there has been the deaths that have occurred. And I am never going to stand up here and justify a single one of those deaths. Nor am I going to try to, nor am I going to even start to get into the psyche of a racist copper. It's not for me to do that. But where I will start is where Finbar heckled and went racism. Because I don't believe that the cause of the problem right now is to do with racism. I believe it is to do with fundamental misunderstandings of where we have got to in society in the States. We've highlighted two major problems right now, on both sides of the House, in education and in housing. And if you look at the way the system has got in terms of the redistribution of wealth for education in the States over the past 40 years, you basically end up with poor areas getting less money for education, which creates more poor areas. And whenever you have areas of poverty, you will end up with crime. That's fundamentally fact. And I challenge anyone in this room who studies criminology to tell me the otherwise.
On that point, where does the poverty come from?
Where does the what?
The poverty come from.
Okay, so the poverty will come as a circular cause. Basically, if you've got areas of poor education, and we all know when you've got areas of poor education, you cannot rise to the top. And in the States right now, we do not have any level of redistribution of wealth with regards to the education system. Now look, I stand on the right side of the fence, and everyone in this room will know that. But one area where we actually have to have a fair system is within the education policy. And in the States, it's woefully lacking right now. We've ended up in this cycle of death and destruction within our inner city areas. And what Black Lives Matter have done is, rather than go to the cause of the problems of this poverty, they've just said racism. They've highlighted some other areas in which they want to change the system by getting rid of this death penalty or another policy, but in reality they're not getting to the nuts and bolts of the issue. No, they're not getting to the nuts and bolts of this issue, which is we are creating cycles of poverty within our inner city areas, which results in the problems that we've got. Now, you combine that with some of the elements of racism that we've currently got within American police systems, and you create the havoc that we've got right now. Do I believe that Black Lives Matter are ever going to get on top of this problem with their current agenda of rioting, right, and getting other people looting and causing more trouble? The answer to that problem is no. I don't believe they're ever going to get to that problem, ever going to get to that solution. The reality, in terms of sorting that problem out, is by getting involved and changing the way in which our education policies are actually sorted out. By getting involved in our actual education policies, right, and sorting that out. On top of that, with regards to the mortgage companies, they're effectively, and they're, because of
that point, sir.
No.
You need to give us a chance to talk.
I don't have to at all. I've had one. So I'm basically isolating areas of harm and areas of good that are basically being done. So now let me talk about the areas of harm in which Black Lives Matter, the movement, have actually caused. Our first have highlighted the problems in which they have caused more deaths, more riots, and on top of that, the key here is they are not isolating the actual causes of the problem. They believe that the cause of the problem is racism, and as such they're going down a racist agenda, and by doing so they're creating more division within the media and within the sectors of the right and left in the States. And as a result of this division, there is not going to be any form of political change to solve the problems that are existing there. And when you carry on with this level of division, which is what Black Lives Matter are doing, rather than actually hitting the nail on the head with regards to the actual problem,
So the like principle of your argument is Black Lives Matter haven't solved racism, they haven't solved poverty, they haven't solved the education issue, but what they are doing is shining a light on this issue, which is prevalent. It's a social movement, it's not meant to change the world, it's meant to shine a light on the problems, which it is doing.
Listen to the first thing I said they have identified that, and that's what they did in 2013. They have basically gone from highlighting the issue in 2013, which is a good thing, and they needed to do that, to now just causing more trouble. They're not actually getting to the bottom of the cause. They've highlighted the cause in 2013, and like with any movement, they have to evolve. They have to evolve, and they haven't evolved. All they've done, they haven't evolved in a good way. All they have done is created a system where rioting is now the norm, and we're not actually sorting the problem out. We're not getting on top of it. I've taken 3.
We need to challenge your point.
Go on then.
You know there's no school without a fire.
That's not a point.
And, you know, if you had given a chance to listen at the time it started, there wouldn't have been a riot.
Me?
No,
me.
Like
the authorities. If they had given a chance to listen, there wouldn't have been rather than getting the police to start causing havoc.
So you admit they're causing havoc?
The police are causing
okay, so
havoc.
you admit they're causing
Guys, please. Within his protected time, he has no obligation to respond to what you have to say. You allow him to continue on with his speech.
I'm glad you just admitted that they have caused havoc, and that's exactly what's happened. Okay, you're going to say it's the police that have caused the havoc. That is what you're going to say. Right? Whereas the real issue here has come from the fact that we have allowed this to get to the absolute pinnacle of destruction on both sides of this fence. That's where we're at. We're at side A now hates side B, and side B now hates side A, and they're both throwing slurs at each other. And if we just stand here in this room, arguing and fighting against each other, you going, you didn't listen, and we going, but actually, you're not doing any good. Whereas what we need to do right this second, Black Lives Matter are not doing this. The authorities in the States are not doing this. I am not the authorities, and I'm definitely not in the States. Right? What we are not doing is currently getting to the root cause of the problem. Right? And that is the biggest reason why I believe Black Lives Matter is currently causing more harm than it is doing good. I've not once said it hasn't done good. But the bottom line is, to solve this problem, we have to start, as you correctly said, sit down at a table and listen to what both sides are saying. And that is not happening, and Black Lives Matter are not advocating that. I urge you to vote with the motion.
Thank you very much. I would just remind the audience that it is at the Speaker's discretion whether he takes your point during the open time or not. I'd ask you to respect the fact, even if you don't necessarily agree with their views, it's a fundamental principle of this institution that you have the right to hear the opposing point of view. It is just as much a right of yours to hear the opposing point of view as to express your own. So I would ask that you respect that parity and only go for your point of information if the Speaker accepts it.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, we will conclude the closing for the opposition. Ms. Katerina Schwartz.
Here's the thing about a bunch of white people standing up in a room and making assertions about the preconditions for racial equality. It represents a failure to fulfill those very preconditions simply by asserting our conceptions into a purportedly emancipatory space. I imagine that's why the audience is so frustrated about their lack of capacity to insert something into the debate, and I hope that you'll ask questions at the end of this and take that time to have your views heard. Ultimately, I'm going to break up into 5 points. Hopefully I'll have time for all of them. I didn't think we'd actually be debating about all of them. Firstly, Firstly, the onus of the Black Lives Matter movement in the context of this debate. Secondly, on the allocation of responsibility for the actions that the proposition team has been talking about. Secondly, the focus, objectives, and the existence of institutional racism. That's the one I didn't think would be arguing. Fourthly, is it about race at all? Kind of tacked on to that. And fifthly, let's talk about the good things that the Black Lives Matter movement has done. One, the onus on us and on the Black Lives Matter movement. You don't even need to believe in institutional racism in the US to decide that we have won this debate today. Why? Because the US values protest and freedom of speech as fundamental rights. So if those things are still valuable, and if we still care about those things, we should care about people's capacity to organise themselves and to stage protests, and we should value that against the harms that the proposition team has decided that they can attach to the Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to talk about attribution of that later. I think that pretty much covers that. And lastly, the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't need to define their legitimacy by what we think they should do. Secondly, on the issue of inciting riots. The Black Lives Matter movement never called for riots. The Black Lives Matter movement never asked for riots. The Black Lives Matter movement called for peaceful protests, has asked for peaceful protests, has spoken out against violence, has spoken out against the shooting of the Dallas police officers, not now. And in fact, the fundamental ethos of that movement is protest, not violence. And that is something that we should care about, and that's something that we should respect. And I hope that everybody in this room has seen the incredibly powerful image of Alicia Evans standing in front of riot police officers doing nothing but existing. And it is the very presence of black people in America that seems to be the problem here, because just existing for a black person in America is a rebellious act. So let's be clear, the cause of the riot is not what the Black Lives Matter movement is doing.
On that point.
It's the massive disenfranchisement and the systemic violence that exists against black people in the United States. Yes.
So how can you justify the rhetoric that's coming from Black Lives Matter, which is basically using phrases like a day of rage? How does that actually equate to anything other than violence?
Because anger is a form of protest. How can you not be angry? Rage is anger. How can you not rage against the system that is systemically disenfranchising you? And that's actually what I'm going to talk about now, so I think it will link in and you'll get the idea. Because quite frankly, widespread and systemic abuse exists in the US. There's economic disenfranchisement, de facto segregation and ghettoisation of communities, de facto there's failure in the public education systems, disproportionately affecting black communities. There is police brutality, not now, you just had one, and the prison industrial complex disproportionately affects black people. We're not talking about socioeconomic conditions, we're talking about the specifically racialised aspects of the way that the US system is run that affect black people. Because there are disparities in the experiences of poor white people and poor black people, and because a white person who has been convicted and sent to prison is still more likely to be hired for a job than an equally qualified black person who has never been to prison. If that is not racism, I'm not exactly sure what it is.
On that point.
Sure.
Yeah, you said a few things like that, for instance, and also, other points that were based on fact. Where are the facts or evidence for this?
All you need to do is go and look at the wealth of studies that exist.
Give us an example.
Okay, I will give you an exact percentage, which is in 2015, 6% of, I mean, you can look it up if you want, there's a Washington Post database of police fatal shootings. So, of the unarmed shooting of fatal shootings of white people, 6% were unarmed. 6%. That's terrible, but it's not that high. Double it, and you have the amount of police shootings of Hispanics that were unarmed people. Triple it, and that is the number of fatal shootings of black people that were unarmed. That is an immediate disparity between the experiences of unarmed people with the police. All of those people were unarmed, but if you are black, you're 3 times more likely to be shot as an unarmed person than a white person is.
On that point.
So is it about race? And I'm going to answer my 4th question now. You've had enough. Sit down. Is it about race? Yes. If it wasn't about race, then middle-class black people would never experience racism. if it wasn't about race, then every person of colour in this room would have never experienced racism because you are clearly the privileged few that have the capacity to go to university. I imagine that that is not your lived experience of the world. On the good that the Black Lives Matter movement has done as my last point until the last minute. 1, let us not discount the importance of opening a political space for marginalised communities. Why? Because before the Black Lives Matter movement, before the huge social wealth of hacktivism, if that's what you want to call it, very few people were talking about the deaths of black people in police custody. Very few people were talking about the disenfranchisement of those black communities. As the first speaker identified, there are still a huge number of people who have those experiences in the United States who are not talked about. The fact that we have as much attention and we can still only pay attention to a few of them should tell you something about the amount of attention that we have in the political space. That opening of political space for marginalised communities to have their voices heard is a fundamentally valuable thing. And it's unfortunate that riots have been attached to it, but it's also unfortunate that the US is characterised by a racist industrial complex. Black Lives Matter is a social movement that creates space for a community that otherwise does not have that space, that otherwise politicians have no incentive to cater for in their policy platform, and who otherwise would not be heard. And that's it.
Thank you very much for that. And with that, we will move to 3 rounds of questions to the floor. I would like to make it abundantly clear right now. These are questions to either side of the floor. These are not mini debates and speeches to suddenly rail against one side or the other. Could you please keep your questions on point and as brief as possible to either side of the motion. With that, we will take one question per proposition to begin with. And could you state your name as well?
Hey, Calvin, how's it going, Calvin?
Yes, Mr. Block.
Can we open the windows, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would like to open the window. It's quite cold in here.
Someone who's sitting over there possibly crawling across the table.
I'm not going to cut that so much to the proposition or
I actually have a strange one. I want to address both sides. I'm just actually quite curious as to why there wasn't a lot more emphasis on the Black Lives Movement. There seemed to be an argument about whether racism in the US existed rather than actually saying Black Lives Matter did A, B, C, and D. And A, B, C, and D are good, but D to Z is bad. And I just kind of hoped that you guys would have had more clarification as to why you felt they had done more harm, and actually why you guys felt they had done more good. To say all these racist things happen in America, just because a group is highlighting that, doesn't mean they're necessarily good. You can't paint people who are oppressed to be saints because they're not. And so I was it was a great debate, but I was kind of disappointed that you guys didn't focus on the motion. You kind of reached out of the scope.
If anyone would like to respond to it?
I completely agree with you, but that was not from our side. I thought every one of our speakers talked completely about Black Lives Matter. No, I think we did, because the fact of the matter is, the riot which they said Black Lives Matter condemned, they said they want peaceful protest, that's a lie. On Twitter, the leader of Black Lives Matter, which actually exists, which is everything that they think he did, about the Milwaukee riots, actually said, we condemn the violence that has led to this. They never condemned the riots. I do not know his name, unfortunately, but he does exist.
Is he the leader of the movement or that chapter?
He's the leader of the movement. But I think we should we discussed their actions.
We have chapters. Would the opposition like to respond?
Oh, yeah. I agree. I did not expect us to be debating about the existence of institutionalised racism in the United States, and I consider the onus of the debate to be to prove the harms or benefits of the movement in approaching institutionalised racism, given that the proposing team focused so heavily on the existence of institutionalised racism as their justification for claiming harm, and saying that because there wasn't a legitimate cause that they were championing, then we should consider all the harms as outweighing anything that they do good. It was necessary to debate on the impact of that, and ultimately I think the debate should be about whether the methods and the means in the space of that creating is emancipatory and is positive. So, I agree.
Any questions to the opposition now?
I have a question.
Okay, so you if it's not directed to the opposition, I'm going to have to move on. If anyone has a question they'd like to address to the opposition, just to have some parity between the two in terms of questions. Yourself, sir, could you state your name?
Yeah, good evening, Kenny Thornton. Pardon my ignorance if this is meant to be focused on the USA, but we've seen in September in the UK, Black Lives Matter shut the London City Airport runway. Now I understand that was to raise awareness in the media, but surely there's better ways than affecting the UK economy, especially for one of the key business airports for London City. Surely there's a better way of raising the profile. Surely that caused a lot more harm than good.
Well, for a start, we're focusing on the US because as Matter started in the US, it is primarily a US movement that deals with US issues. It has started to spread out. It started, I think, largely in solidarity and then started to deal with issues in other countries, such as the actions of police forces in Canada and Britain. However, that is not a tactic that is specific to Black Lives Matter. And in fact, it is the very same tactic that was used by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in the 60s. They're very, in fact, I have a quote here. From the letter to Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King defined the purpose of his movement to create a situation so crisis-packed that it would inevitably open the door to negotiation. And that's what they did. They were, let's face it, they were breaking the law of their time. They were very disruptive. And not only were their largest antagonists to them segregationists and racists, but also white moderates who, although they agreed with their motives, they were cut off by the disorder they were causing by their actions.
If I just could have that for just to repeat that in the final point. Sorry,
We're kind of operating on time. No, I'm very sorry.
No.
We can continue the argument in the bar afterwards if you want. That's us walking up the Yes, another question. The proposition test. Yourself, sir, if you'd like to do Yes, sir, sorry.
I have a question for you. My name is Andrew. You mentioned about how lack of education affects an area and increases crime, but you didn't really express or you didn't really prove how that affects or that influences or justifies a policeman shooting an unarmed black man. So how does it relate to that? I'll let you to answer that.
I don't think there is a justification for shooting an unarmed black man. That's why they justify it.
Sorry?
I don't think there is ever a justification for shooting an unarmed black man. That's why they try to justify it.
So how does not being educated, like how does it come into the picture? Like what is?
Okay, so I think what you've got to look at in reality, from my perspective here, is that if you have an area where there are more police calls to an area because there is more crime in said area. Let's say, I'm making this number up, this is a wild number, 1% of police are racist, let's just say that. Just for sake of an argument, let's just say 1% of police are racist.
I still don't agree with you.
Okay, let's just say 10%. I mean, it doesn't actually matter for the sake of the hypothesis I'm going to propose. And in said area where there is more crime, there's 100 calls to that area because there is just more generalised crime. And 10% are racist, and they will give any given opportunity they'll shoot somebody. There's going to be more shootings based on the fact there is more crime if there is 1% or 10% racist. That's what's going to That's what's going to happen if you get more crime in an area.
Yeah. So now, there's no
So from my perspective, right, in terms of using to me, try to justify, I can't justify it. All I'm trying to say to you is where the statistics come from. So if you look at an area where you've got more crime, because education is down, right, so therefore you get more crime, you're going to get more police calls. And therefore, with the more police calls, you're going to get that racist copper who's going to take any given opportunity to basically kill somebody because that's what he wants to do, because he is a racist.
So isn't that racism, and isn't that enough to cause a group to agitate?
I agree with you. I've said that. I completely agree with you. I agree that that time when you have that copper, 10%, whatever the number is, I don't know what that number is, I'm not going to try to, nor will we ever know, right? But just by virtue of more crime and more calls, that racist copper is going to cause more unlawful death. It's statistics, basic statistics. I'm not justifying it, nor have I once tried to justify it, but that is just what's going to happen if you've got more crime in an area with a level of racist coppers.
Thank you. Would anyone from the opposition like to respond?
This issue of education and how it's affected by crime goes beyond, while it's a serious issue, goes beyond the issue of police shooting. And it shows more of the prejudice against black people in these areas. It's fine to say that, but the point is, on one hand, the reason that education is such an issue for black people is that we have a white student get 6 months in prison for rape because he has a promising career. Meanwhile, we have so many 18-year-old black students who now have to serve 30 years in prison for possession of marijuana. Nothing considered with their careers, with their prospects. It's the laws there are prejudiced against them in regards to education. That's why there's more police calls. That's why it's areas with more crime, because it is stacked. The laws are stacked against them and prejudiced against them in regards to their prospects for education.
Thank you, that. And any points to the opposition?
No, sorry, proposition.
Yourself, sir, to the opposition? Review?
No, I would like to speak to the guys.
Anyone for the opposition go on? On the opposition a little less of an easy ride and ask some questions. Yourself?
Can I just kind of on this for both?
Sorry?
Can I just be on this kind of for both?
Sure, if it's at least it's something I address.
It's just like, the riots are always being attributed to Black Lives Matter. Is there any evidence that they've encouraged it, or on the ground, any evidence that they've distanced themselves from it? Because I haven't been given any evidence either way as whether they've condemned it or,
If I'm not mistaken, contrary evidence has been sort of raised by both sides, but if you, it sounds like to clarify where at least where the sources from.
Well, effectively, this is the most dangerous thing about it. I agree that there may not be like certain heads, but this is the problem. It's effectively non-organised in every which way. So you can dip it.
Stand up.
Well,
you can always stand up. That's so nice.
For you, that's not. But yeah, so I think that's where the problem is. There's no doubt that there's peaceful protesters, then there's non-peaceful protesters, but there's no, we can't actually see the link, and people can dip in and dip out of movement. They can go down any DC street, any city street, shouting, "We want dead cops," which we've seen, and also peaceful protesters who haven't done it. But the problem is there is no accountability within this organisation, and that is basically where we're coming from. There's absolutely no accountability.
That is very much the downfall of a liberals movement, but that is firstly symptomatic of the changing nature of political organisations, not just Black Lives Matter but also the Occupy movements. We no longer have, apart from this sort of momentum, but that's in a different country, we no longer have these movements which are entirely based upon a charismatic leader. We more have these sort of general broad church groups based upon a general set of principles. One reason for that is because there have been many movements in the past 50 years based on charismatic leaders, and what happens when that charismatic leader is taken out, meaning assassinated, the whole thing crumbles like a wet cake. And so maybe perhaps the most extreme factions of Black Lives Matter have supported riots, but since when do we judge entire political movements on their most radical elements? If we follow that through around the world, then there are racist, misogynists and homophobes undoubtedly within UK, and the Conservative Party, who within in the last 10 years have been very vocal and very well documented. However, does that mean that the whole of UKIP, the Conservatives or Labour are inherently a bigoted movement? And does that mean that anything that they raise, any issue they raise, any position they stand for is therefore illegitimate?
Right.
You started it so that they respond.
5 seconds.
I mean, 5 words. 5 words.
UKIP, all the parties until that they do it peacefully. That's why no one's issue it. They don't go around burning the shops, red down streets, calling for the slaughter.
Everyone does. Right, humanity is complex.
One more question for either side. So this question is from the proposition. Yourself, sir?
So you focus correct on the sorry, my name's Kanyan. Right, you went all about this whole education. You need to educate. You need to educate and educate. I think the question is not just education. Have you ever asked the question, maybe why are these people not educated? And do you have to be educated before a white police officer sees you equally? Maybe because the system was a racist system from the very conceivement of the system. Black people, Latino people, Jewish people are not an addendum which you just add to the constitution. Say tomorrow we're going to love black people, because you can write it on paper, but it doesn't change the way people think.
Brilliant, thank you. I think you hit the nail on the head quite well here. In as much as that, what you've got right now is you've got Black Lives Matter, which are trying to confuse social issues and political issues. The Republicans and the states in general don't want to have any degree of wealth distribution. They don't want it. It's fundamentally against what they believe. And to sort out the education system in the States, you have to have wealth distribution. This is nothing to do with, in my opinion, and plenty of others, race. It's all to do with their actual economics principles, which is they don't want any degree of wealth. I don't want any degree of wealth distribution. It's not because I don't like people in this group. I just believe what is mine, and I don't want to give it to someone else.
What if slaves gave it to you, though? What if slaves gave it to you?
I'll take that one straight in the head, thanks. Look, I'm Jewish, right? So I was kicked out. My family were kicked out, and their stuff was stolen by Germans. Right? I have not for 1 second gone back to Germany myself and gone, I want my house back that you stole from my great granddad. That happened. I have not once said to the Germans, give me that £150,000 that is rightfully mine.
Do you know how many guys
I had grandparents that were kicked out and their stuff was taken from them. And not once have I said, oh, look, you've got my money and I want it back. No, but I fundamentally disagree with the redistribution of wealth. It's not because I don't like other people, it's just because I believe what is mine is mine. And that's the fundamental issue here with what's going on in the States right now. Is you've got a group of people, the Republican Party, who fundamentally believe that it's nothing to do with race. It's just a fundamental thought process. They don't want to give. They're fine. If you don't agree with it, that's fine. If you don't agree with that, as a principle, that's absolutely fine. But that is not racism, that's just a fundamental thought process. And having that fundamental thought process is not racism.
With yourself, you brought up the fact that Irish people were slaves too. Yes, they were, but not to the same extent. Because tragedy works in different degrees, and the response to the Holocaust was much more complex. Well, you mentioned the Jews in Nazi Germany. The fact that because the Holocaust was such a shocking event that happened in such a small period of time, there was a great degree of guilt in the worldwide, which led to the mass recognition of Israel as a state, which continues to this day. In fact, in the United States, any candidate, if they want any kind of success, has to accept the right of Israel to exist. And not only that, but full-footed support of any action it might take. It's not ultimately destroyed. Whereas, because slavery was something that happened over 600 years and had the time to become fully entrenched within the entire, not just the culture, but the economy. It was an economic system. And overturning slavery would be like overturning capitalism. And we saw how that happened for Russia. It didn't go very well. And fact that by the time that slavery was ended, it wasn't really ended. In the US, if we look at the emancipation population, which we think of as this great moral moment in human history, it is just like any other act of government. To be passed, it had to compromise, and it is full of little gimmicks and clauses that give allowances to certain counties where they are able to keep their slaves but still remain within the Union. And within the UK, the largest piece of government expenditure, aside from the 2 world wars, was compensation for slaveholders. 40% of the government budget. And the way that was paid for was slaves had to be slaves for the next 4 years to pay back the money that their slaveholders were putting up. It's like, we're going to give you your freedom and recognise your rights of man, but by God, it'll cost you. And there is just such a lack of recognition of the tragedy that was slavery, and that it wasn't that long ago. It was at most 90 years ago. That is 180 years ago, sorry. That's with 2 90-year-olds living and dying back to back.
Thank you very much for that. And one final question for the opposition. Yourself,
could I make an abstaining question, please?
Yes, of course you can. If there's any other opposition questions, if there are no other opposition questions, I'll come back to you. But if anyone has a question for the opposition, I'm just trying to keep it balanced. To the opposition, yeah?
Oh no. I'm just wondering why like none of you guys, so like she made a valid point, but also like the Black Lives Movement didn't just start, like it's just a continuation of the Black Liberation Movement.
Yes.
And so you can't really look at the Black Lives Movement in seclusion of the Black Liberation Movement, because it's literally just building up from it. And so if you were to go back as far as you should go back, because you cannot just be like 2013, murders were happening, this is where we start looking at racism. Like this is now where it starts, this is what we're going to look at. It has to be like, how did it reach this point where black people are being killed for no reason? Like, how has it led up to this point? And why is it now that we're thinking, okay, fine, maybe we should give this a shot?
Thank you very much. Could I get your name? Yes, continue your report. Never mind. That was to the. I'll take that as to the opposition. The opposition get first response. If you like to respond to that.
I totally agree. As I was saying, the Black Lives Matter are the clear successors of Martin Luther King. There is a clear pattern between black social movement and the Christians of it, which say it's coming too thick and too fast, that it is too aggressive and ultimately counterproductive. That has happened for Martin Luther King with Black Panthers, and now for Black Lives Matter. The Black Panthers were described by the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, as the single greatest internal threat to American democracy. Now, considering the size of the Black Panther Party, the equivalent of that is the Westminster government saying its single greatest internal threat is INLA, the Irish National Liberation Army. There are about 20 of them in total, and in case you haven't noticed, the Irish nation is still waiting to be liberated. Primarily from M. De Valera's legacy.
I agree. This didn't start in 2013. An alternative point which I would have liked to say I didn't get, which was really my fault. Do you know that since 1960, the percentage of black children in America who grew up with their dogs went from 25% to 75%. 75%. Do you know that 13% of America, which is black, make up 50% of the murders? Now, I am in no way condemning, but what I'm saying is Black Lives Matter is essentially shining a light on the wrong issues. There's serious serious social issues that are being overlooked in the black community. And I believe that by adhering to this campaign, I agree that when Irish cops shoot on a black group, they deserve to go to jail. But this isn't the problem that's affecting black Americans. This is why there's such wellness value. It's because 75% of children don't grow up with that. Whoever has endured that understands not having a father figure. All the stats prove that it leads to crime, drugs, jail time, it all correlates in that way. And this is something that this side is not bringing up. And it's a key factor that's affecting black Americans. 100%.
Thank you for that, and that's where we'll move to the vote of the House. Our first vote tonight.
No, can I make a neutral point first? Just one. I would just like to thank the proposition for speaking with such grace and class. I think it's really impressive to hold such a dignified approach to such a difficult issue. And more seriously though, it's really impressive to stand up and make a case when you know that 99% of the room disagree with you. So I think you should.
For that. I'm not really as chair allowed to take things, but on that note of neutrality, I wholeheartedly agree. I'm agreeing with neutral. Yes. So first vote of this evening is based on your opinion prior to the debate. So if you were in favour of the motion before the speakers spoke tonight, could you please raise your hands and say aye.
The motion that this House believes Black Lives Matter has done more harm than good. If you believe that, then raise your hand. That's good.
You can vote for yourself. And if you didn't agree with the motion before you came tonight, please raise your hand. It's kind of number of people.
There's certainly young people here on stage as well.
If you didn't really have an opinion on the motion at all before you came tonight, please raise your hand and say
That's a little upset to me.
That's the prior That's the prior
There's certainly
And the following vote is on speaker ability this evening. So if you thought the proposition made their case for the women doesn't matter than the opposition, please raise your hands and say aye. You can vote for yourself.
Speaker performance.
Speaker performance. If you thought the proposition made their case better tonight, say raise your hands and say aye. And if you thought the opposition stated their case better this evening, raise your hands, please.
I disagree with that.
And if you thought both sides argued their case in a very equal manner and were both as good as each other tonight, raise your hands.
It's not fine.
And it's in what is understandably a very close run race. The proposition, the motion, has failed this evening, and on speakability as well, the opposition won that as well. So the motion has failed. And a few last bits of housekeeping before we head on to the bar, which you're all welcome to report. First of all, thank you very much to the Afro-Caribbean Society for joining us for what has undoubtedly been a very complex debate. Thank you for sticking with us through quite a tense debate, it has to be said. So a round of applause. member, Mr. Finley, also reminded me of one piece of business that I forgot to bring up before the debates. Apologies. We, not this weekend coming, but the following, so the weekend of the 29th and 30th of October, the Literary and Scientific Society will be playing host to our annual voting competition, where debaters from all around the world. We have one team that finds the actual time absolutely engaged with that. Coming to be a competition, a 3-day competition in Queen's University of Belfast. The one problem we have with that is that they all need couches to sleep on. So if you would like to play the role of Good Samaritan, enjoy a little bit of crack with people from England, and it's quite hard because they're from England to enjoy crack with people from England. If you want to know when you're listening to people from all around the world, couches on your floor, please talk to us at the end. And final piece of business, if you would like your membership card, the membership cards are now published, so if you have signed up and paid, would you like to come up at the end, I will send you a membership card, and you will get all the wonderful benefits that come along with it that I highlighted at the start of the debate. I'm really happy to do it again. Workshops, Christmas dinner, formal, that sort of stuff. You'll also see how awful my left handwriting is as well. And yes, you also need your membership card to be able to speak in this institution as well.
What do you want? If anybody wants to speak in future debates, can you email us in and let us know on the turn card sign up?
Yes, please, and also you can comment on our Facebook page as well. Lenderific is on Facebook.
Can I see something?
Yes, sir.
No.
On the motion?
No, like.
Or just yes, sir, go ahead.
Hi everyone. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who came and to the members of the ACS who came. You guys made a good turnout. And one question I would just like to pose to everyone is, I've sat here and I've listened to everyone, and you've all made valid points about the good and the bad side of black. About the motion this evening, but as you go, I just want you to ponder on the thought about what it has cost those families, because at the end of the day, people's lives are being affected, and emotion rules everything. So I just want you to stop and consider about the cost, be it financial, be it emotional, that black families face. And I want you to put yourself in the shoes that would you like to be a black person in America facing these issues today? And I think that would lead you to the right answers.
For that very poignant point, and I can think of no better way to sum up a debate of this magnitude and this importance. So again, I'd just like to applaud the ACS for all their cooperation tonight. With that, we will adjourn to the House floor for practice.